You're listening to The Watchers, a show where two women from opposite ends of New Jersey watch movies and TV about Winona Ryder voiceovers and Claire Danes' quivering chin.
Oh my God, that chin. Yeah. It's like, she should like insure that quivering chin. Because it's incredible. It's magical.
But I do think those are the two most, it used to be significant haircut.
Significant haircuts.
Now it's those two things. We're just on a run.
The Winona Ryder voiceover thing, I didn't realize how many of these movies that she's in that they ask her to just narrate the fucking thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, and to me, I can't not hear Heather's in all of them. I said this last week. Like, that is the one for me that I've seen a million times that I could recite. Oh, weeks ago we were talking about what's the movie that we could recite kind of verbatim. Heather's would be my other one.
Yeah, and I'm Andrea.
And I'm Jodie.
Yeah, and we watched Little Women 1994.
Yes.
And I watched Little Women 2019.
I did not.
And we'll talk about all of that.
Yeah.
Before we get into everything we're going to talk about with this movie, there's one little fun, I don't know if it's a fun fact, I don't know what you want to call it, but have you ever heard anybody's mother in any other piece of media referred to as Marmee?
Oh, no, never.
Do you know why?
No.
So Louisa May Alcott is from Massachusetts.
Yeah. Oh, is it it's the Boston accent?
Mommy was a new term. Like, people weren't using mommy very often.
But if you're in Massachusetts, you say Marmee?
Well, no. I mean, it hadn't been written down
Mommy.
Yet. So she was like, oh, we say mommy.
Right.
How would you spell that?
Right.
And because, like, if you
put an R in it.
Right. If you lived in Massachusetts and had never written the word car down before, you might spell it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like the reverse, I guess, of that. But
that's really funny.
That was her best guess at how you would spell mommy.
Oh, that's hilarious, actually.
And so it's Marmee, and they just kept that pronunciation and apparently in the one with Katharine Hepburn, she does pronounce it mommy. Actually, yeah. I don't know. I actually didn't watch her say that. I just read that.
Yeah.
But so she got it at least. But
that's really funny. I had no idea.
Yeah.
That's
so
great.
I just wanted to share that. Okay, we can get into the rest of it all.
Okay. Yeah. The reason we picked this one, again, it's on the list, but we decided to do it next, mostly for the Winona Ryder connection. We're kind of on a run of like, quote unquote, women's movies. Mm-hmm. Every movie that we've talked about recently, there's some quote somewhere of a woman being like, the men didn't want this one to get made because they said no one would come.
This is like the example, which is perfect because it's also the example of the book itself. Like, there's so much going on.
Well, and it's the one that it's not that the others didn't like do reasonably well that we've talked about, but this one really did quite well and kind of really proved them wrong. Despite
it being every article that I read referred to the, I think it's in New York, it's an oral history where they talk about the fact that it was referred to a needle in the eye movie, as in, I'd rather have a needle in the eye than go see this movie, is what your husband would say. And that I read that quote so many times when we were doing our research.
My
Brutal.
God. I know. Yeah. No, they just, I read a quote, I think it's maybe the same article. The producer said, people just weren't interested in a movie with a lot of women, which could be said about a lot of the movies in this run we're doing. The only reason apparently that it got greenlit, not the only reason, but a big reason, is because Winona Ryder agreed to do it.
Yeah. She was attached even before the director.
This is a huge time for her. So like her name could not have been bigger in this period in the 90s. The other, so the same producer in that article mentioned that the executives suggested that instead of doing a faithful adaptation of Little Women, that they do a modern version. Did you see this? The marches in the 90s, and the sort of conflict was they didn't get a car for Christmas, or they didn't have a car at Christmas or something. It's like, oh my God, can you imagine? They wanted Little Women meets Clueless or something.
Yeah, I so can imagine. There has been at least one version, like modernized version. I think it was like a made-for-TV movie, though. I don't know if it's even worth talking about. But I so can imagine, especially because, so let's start where we often start with these. Your relationship with the movie and or the book going into this.
Okay. So I was, I think, 17 or 18 when this came out. I read the book Little Women. I was like, I don't read a lot of fiction now, unfortunately, but I was the kid under the blankets with the flashlight at 2 a.m. reading. Like, this was my entire life was just the library when I was a kid. And so I read Little Women multiple times. I loved the story. I think, like, thinking about the last few movies we've done, I think part of it was just like my fascination at like a strong, warm mother figure and like a cozy New England house with lots of activity. And, you know, I grew up basically as an only child. And so there was just this romanticism to the whole thing, having sisters, having a mom that like cooked and I almost said cared for you. That's terrible. Leave it in. She doesn't know what podcasts
I was gonna say, yeah.
But yeah, so I really liked the book growing up. It was like just a part of my headcanon. And then I watched the movie as a teenager, 18, 19, whatever. I think when it came out, because I remembered reading the background info that it came out around Christmas or on Christmas, basically. And I think I probably saw it when I was home for Christmas. And I liked it. I liked Winona Ryder a lot. Obviously, we know how I feel about Samantha Mathis. I identify with Claire Danes. Like, yeah, I mean, I think I've said in a past podcast, like, people at the time said, and I did not, but people at the time said I looked like Claire Danes because I had the same red hair dye as she did in My So-Called Life. But so everyone in this movie was like, yeah, I want to see this thing.
Right. And you were a similarly morose, beflanneled teen, right?
I was. Yeah, absolutely.
That makes sense.
And I was also so weirdly, I think maybe one of the reasons I was kind of drawn to this movie is also because Claire Danes plays a sick kid. And like, as we've talked about, both of us were kind of sick kids, like
sickly children.
Yeah. Like I was just I had a very, sort of temperamental constitution, let's say. And something was always wrong with me. Yeah. And I didn't have scarlet fever, but I did have German measles when I was a little baby.
Oh, pretty cool.
I know, right? Like, you know, some plastic diseases.
Yeah, my mom had scarlet fever. And her mom, my grandma, and her sister, my grandma's sister, my great aunt, are identical twins. And while my mom had scarlet fever, she swapped them in her head and refused to let my grandmother care for her. And my Aunt Lo had to come live with them while she was sick. Yeah, it was the whole thing.
Wow.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah. I mean, like, there was something romantic about Beth as the sick kid. Obviously, she dies, which isn't great. But the way that she's like this angelic, you know, character that everyone loves and cares for. And it was kind of like, yeah, I just, as someone that was often sick and not always as lovingly cared for,
yes.
Yeah, I had a lot of affection for this movie for those reasons. What about you?
Makes sense. This is my first time seeing this movie.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. And so I think, and I read Little Women. I'm an English major, so I studied Alcott. I'm an English major whose focus was 19th century lit, though most specifically British lit, but you can't be an English major and not get, you know.
I mean, this could be British. Like, it's so New England that it's almost England.
Yeah,
like,
that totally. Yeah, 100%. If it weren't for it being, if the backdrop weren't the Civil War.
The Civil War, yeah.
Which is so funny that we'll get there, I think. Yeah. But I loved the book, but it's not like one of my top 10 or whatever.
No.
And so that's one reason I think I didn't seek out the movie. And another reason being adaptations of 19th century novels are often stuffy and forget that, like, and I hate to be like the English major who, like, to talk about this way English majors will talk about Shakespeare. They're like, if you get it, you get how, like, funny, or you get how it is. But I think oftentimes, like, adaptations take themselves way too seriously. And Absolutely. I just kind of assumed that's what this would be. And then I also kind of assumed that really for the first, like, 10 minutes of this movie, I was like, oh, this is going to be, like, so precious with it. And then that ended up not being the case. I'll say I had a really good time watching it. So yeah, that's where I think I came to it pretty objectively. I'm also generally not precious about adaptations. Like, I don't need them to be like a perfect So.
No, and sometimes that's the fun, to see how it's adapted. Like, I also enjoyed rewatching it. I was like a little worried that I would be bored, because again, movies also just were slower in the 90s, and this is a 2-hour movie.
Yeah,
but the atmosphere was a big reason that I was able to kind of like just fall into it again. Like, it wasn't shot, most of it wasn't actually shot in Massachusetts.
Yeah, Vancouver, right?
Vancouver, yeah. Just the opening. And a lot of it is like practical effects. There wasn't really any snow, but it works. Like,
I think they said mashed potato flakes is the yeah.
And there's a way that, and I read an interview with the director of photography, and he talked a lot about the specifics of the way it was lit, thinking about candlelight at the time, but also having it be bright enough that they didn't have to like do too much to it in the edit. It was very carefully crafted atmospherically by the people involved. And I think that it was just like kind of nice to live in that world a little bit. I'll also say I'm currently watching The Gilded Age for the first time, which is but it's something that I can have on while I'm at the studio, and it's very pretty to look at, and a lot of it is filmed in Newport, Rhode Island, and it's just like, it's very not my thing usually, but being in these like historical period dramas all at the same time is interesting to think about, like the homeliness and the like, because the Marches aren't lower income, but they're not rich either.
Well,
like they're in this weird middle ground.
Yeah, it's so funny because Joe says at the beginning something like they'd fallen into, she says something like circumstantial poverty. It's not that exactly in the last few years, and that's why they have this big house and the movie really tames this. So it's hard not to talk about Joe and the March family as if they were Alcott, or as if they were Louisa and the Alcott family, because the house and the family are modeled so closely on Alcott's life. So what I was about to say was that like the actual property, Orchard House it's called, was like on some pretty sprawling land for Massachusetts anyway. They had like orchards and all these winding paths, and so they had to like, that part is not so faithfully rendered, and I think it's because you have to feel like they're struggling a little more. Well,
they also had to find a house that resembled it, and I was reading one of the articles I read was talking about the location scouting and how it was like they were shown like 4 properties or something, and then the director and the DP were like, okay, show us the other options, and they were like, no, that's it.
This is all you got?
Yeah, they were shown like 4 places, and she said, can you show me some more? I'll be back in 10 days. And he said, I think we saw the only 4. But one of them was the Women's University Club in Vancouver. And so that's what they ended up using, I believe. And they also just had to do a lot of set dressing.
Yeah. I read that like because one of the reasons they went with the space they went with was because it had 2 houses, and it made it more practical for them because the Lawrence's house needed to be next door, and that they just built fully constructed facades for the 2 houses, and that I think it's the Lawrence house, the facade was built actually in front of it, and then the people just continued to live in the house while they filmed.
That's funny.
Yeah. As opposed to, I don't want to talk too much about the 2019 movie. I'll save most of it for the end. But one of the things that I liked is that house in the 2019 movie is so much closer to the actual Alcott house. And it's because one reason is they filmed the whole thing in Massachusetts. They were able to do that.
I was wondering.
Yeah. And Gerwig and her team, so you can't film in Orchard House.
Orchard House, yeah.
apparently the only major difference is that the rooms they built were bigger because obviously the rooms were
filming.
Yeah. But they went in and like took measurements and sampled things and were really painstaking. There are like pictures of the cast in the house.
It's funny they did none of that with the costumes.
That's what's so funny.
It's so crazy.
Gerwig just picked the things that mattered to her. Yeah. And one of the things that didn't matter to her was
the costumes.
Yeah, but the house, apparently it was really important that she get right. In fact, I had to look up when I was watching it. I was like, oh my God, I think they filmed this at Orchard House, but they didn't. It's just a really great...
Massachusetts is just full to the brim of house museums of various 19th century figures.
It's so cool because like there are two other adaptations of the movie before 1994, and it seems like everybody for pretty much every adaptation went and visited Orchard House, which makes sense, but it's just cool to think about that place being somewhere that has just always been in the conversation. I think that's cool.
Totally. So this movie came out basically at Christmas in 1994. It had like a limited release and then a full release basically on Christmas.
Yeah, it's such a Christmas movie, even though it spans many seasons over many years, but it just is so cozy, and Christmas is one of the first words in it. So
it was pretty successful right off the bat. The screenplay was by Robin Swycord, I believe is how you pronounce her name, directed by Gillian Armstrong, an Australian director. Jeffrey Simpson was the director of photography. He also is Australian, I believe, and they just like worked really well together.
We've had a really good run of movies where it seems like the set was just like people getting along. Stoltz said in that interview I watched, or it's not really an interview, it's like a Q&A before screening, but he was saying like everybody's kids were there. There were like dogs running around. He was like, it seems like when you get on a set that is primarily like organized by women, it just always feels really free. And I was
interesting.
Have
to insert my Eric Stoltz anecdote here again, of course, that had brunch next to him once in New York when I lived there with my friends. He was by himself.
Oh.
Seemed fine. Yeah, seemed fine. But yeah, it took them like 12 years to get this made. Amy Pascal was executive VP of production at Columbia and had, with Robin, had spent 12 years like shopping it around. Once Winona Ryder got on board, it kind of moved. But did you read about the Winona Ryder's background with this book?
Fascinating.
Wild. So in 93, there was a famous kidnapping of a 12-year-old Polly Klaas. And she ended up
in Petaluma,
California. where Winona Ryder grew up and was from, and she ended up unfortunately being murdered. But one of her favorite books apparently was Little Women, and her parents had given Winona Ryder a copy of the book.
Yeah, Winona was really involved with the case. Gone like on TV asking for her return, and it really like affected her.
Yeah, I mean Petaluma, I guess, is a very small place, and it was Winona Ryder was raised basically on a commune, so I think that there was a lot of personal connection there. But yeah, it's they ended up dedicating the movie to Polly Klaas. I saw it at the end, and I was like, wait, what? Because I remember that case vaguely.
It's interesting to think that like the butterfly effect of that, because Winona was like driven to do the movie because of that, and then Gillian Armstrong was only attached to it because of Winona. And at the time, I think we sort of, I mean, it's still the case now, but even 30 years ago, there's not a huge pool of female directors to pull from.
Absolutely not.
And so the idea of this movie, one, being in less capable hands, or two, being made by a male director, I think you end up with a very different outcome.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Winona wanted to only work with a female director on it.
Right.
Which is kind of how they ended up asking Gillian Anderson, who didn't want to do it at first because she had just done another movie.
I wish they'd asked Gillian Anderson.
I'm sorry, Gillian Anderson. Gillian Armstrong.
She would have done a great job. She would be a great Marnie.
Oh my God. No, she's too hot to be Marnie. I'm sorry.
Whoa. You tell that to Laura Dern. She plays Marmee in the 2019
I know.
version.
I'm not, Laura Dern's not my vibe. I don't know why.
Wow.
It grossed $95 million overall worldwide, 3 Academy Award nominations, Best Actress for Winona Ryder, Costume Design, and Original Score. But interestingly, so 94, other big films that came out in 94 were like Pulp Fiction, Shawshank Redemption. Like it was a lot of like man movies.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and this was a female director, female producer, female writer, and female-led cast based on a book by a female author.
It rolls.
Yeah.
Gillian Armstrong, just to talk through the crew a little bit before we get much further into the cast.
Yes.
Gillian Armstrong, this is the movie that I most know her for doing, obviously.
Yes.
The ones I really want to talk about are Swikard and Denovi. And then also I want to talk about their Colleen Atwood.
The
their costume designer.
Yes. Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah. So Swikard, it's just like she's another one of those, like, again, after Little Women, Matilda, Practical Magic, Memoirs of a Geisha, Jane Austen Book Club, Curious Case of Benjamin Button. So she's really, it seems like Little Women kind of kicked it off, but her sweet spot seems to be film adaptations.
Yeah.
Of classic works, because all of those are that. And they've all been, for the most part, really well received. So that's a pretty impressive track record.
Seriously. She, there was I read an interview with her where she talked about the effect of Little Women, not on her own career, but she said, I wish that Little Women had shaken things up a little more than it had in terms of like the desire for male dominated movies. She said, studios viewed it as an anomaly. Beaches, Pretty Woman, Steel Magnolias, each one came out and people said it was a fluke. I said, how many of these movies with female leads have to succeed before people understand that there's a female audience?
Yeah.
Tell us when you find out.
Exactly. How much did you look into Denovi's track record? Because
Not as much as you, I think. Yeah, so tell me about it.
Okay. She produced her first big movie. She's got a couple credits before that as Heathers. She produced Heathers.
I did not know this.
Also,
I think. Oh wait, yeah. No, that one I did know. Because I remember it was her connection to Winona Ryder. That one I knew.
That's what I started to say when we were off mic, and I was saying, oh, maybe we did. I also think we must have talked about it when we recorded Heathers, who the producer was, because when we covered it. But also Edward Scissorhands, Batman Returns, Nightmare Before Christmas, Ed Wood, Little Women, and I'm skipping a few here. I'm just kind of highlighting the ones I care about. James and the Giant Peach, Practical Magic, Walk to Remember. She just, and then most recently, let's see if there's anything else that we've talked about or might. A miniseries called The Veil. She's producing Practical Magic 2. She also produced the 2019, along with Swikard, Little Women. So they came back together for it.
Right. Yeah, I did read that. Yeah, that's quite a track record.
Yeah. And then the one that I was more excited to talk about, because Jesus Christ, is Colleen Atwood, their costume designer. Holy smokes.
I know. It's funny how, we don't always, it's always a period movie where we're like, let's talk about the costume designer. But when you look at the other films that, I think it's actually pronounced Colleen. I heard.
Oh, is she one of those?
I heard someone say it that way in an interview. I don't know if that's actually accurate, but we'll go with it.
We'll put them both there.
Yeah. She, the ones that you would think of for costuming are things like Chicago, Memoirs of a Geisha, Alice in Wonderland, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. She also has worked with Tim Burton, Edward Scissorhands, Sleepy Hollow, Ed Wood, Big Fish, Planet of the Apes, Sweeney Todd. She also, though, worked on things like Silence of the Lambs.
Married to the Mob.
Yeah,
it seems like she's Jonathan Demme's go-to.
Yeah.
That's what it seems happens with her, is that she's so good at her job that people just stick with her forever, no matter what genre they work in.
Because also, I'm sure you saw this as well. I know you love this movie, but she did the costuming for That Thing You Do. Which is again, it's not something that you would immediately think of the costuming as such a huge part of. But of course it is. It's a period piece.
Yeah.
And, it's not big ball gowns, but it's important.
Right, but it is coordinated. It's a lot of coordinated suits that they have to figure out. And yeah, she just has such a fun...
Well,
she also,
and then there's the...
Are you going to say...
Were you going to say it? You say it.
My Chemical Romance. Is that what you were thinking? She's a costume designer for Welcome to the Black Parade. I had like some trouble with Jersey Connections. That's a big one. It's just...
That is a huge one,
tangential. The biggest one I had in the movie, like more specifically, is they quote Whitman, who's obviously a big Jersey guy, Walt Whitman.
Yeah.
I said Walt Whitman like people didn't know who I meant. But yeah, that's our big Jersey connection, I think.
I thought I found another one, but I could be wrong.
You might know better than I do.
No, I think that was probably it. Yeah, so costuming, incredible. I think I mentioned Jeffrey Simpson was director of photography. In the interview that I read with him, he's talking about how he and Gillian Armstrong approach the look of a movie. And he talked about how as they are building sets and locations being secured and things like that in preparation to film, they both go and take tons of photographs. They have huge reference files. They even start to work out camera angles during that time, photographing from certain angles to kind of figure out ahead of time what's going to work, looking at the light at different times of day, which is really, like, it's an obvious thing once you say that, but, like, it's really cool to think about that aspect of it, how you can kind of do some preparation even in that moment. And he said, like, obviously it changes once you get on set, but I've done that with all the films over the past 4 or 5 years and find it useful. Jill had books filled with photos and she'd use some of mine sometimes and some of hers. We both have a visual sense, which is why maybe another reason I like working with her.
That's so cool to learn about different processes and how they, I want maybe now's a good time to talk about 2019, the costume specifically. We'll talk more about the actual differences, at the end, like I said, but the costume designer there was Jacqueline Duran, who, as you pointed out, has gotten some flack despite winning the Oscar for the lack of period accuracy. But what's interesting to me is like that seems to be her.
Where are the bonnets?
Where are the bonnets? But like before the 2019 version, she was the costume designer for Pride and Prejudice, Atonement, which is I love that book so much. I love the movie a lot too, but it's just such an incredible book. Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, Anna Karenina, Macbeth, and apparently, again, I don't have the eye for costuming that other people make. And then the Barbie movie, of course. Apparently she can be hit or miss in terms of accuracy. And it seems to be, and I think this is where her and Gerwig maybe are aligned, that they're not as concerned with being accurate as Atwood may have been. And are more kind of chasing a vibe and a feeling of what they're trying to evoke more than anything else. Yeah,
so one thing I read about with the 2019 version is basically they tried to give each of the 4 sisters kind of their own color palette, which is a thing that makes total sense in filmmaking and is often done, but if you are interested in accuracy, is not a thing that makes any sense because the sisters in a cash-strapped family would be sharing clothes and would be passing things down to each other, which is done in the 94 version. You see people wearing each other's dresses over time and
I
people
love
wearing
that
the same
detail
dress
so much. I think and that they don't make a big deal of it. It's just part of the
the dress that's the focus of Meg going to the ball that she's made herself shows up later, I believe on Beth or Amy. And so that's much more true to what to the novel and also to what life would have been like at that time for a family. But yeah, the other thing is the accessories and the hairstyles and the lack of bonnets and the undergarments and literally the length of the dresses. All of that stuff is just sort of whatever.
Right. Whatever we think looks good.
Apparently Greta Gerwig just doesn't like bonnets. And so that's why there were no bonnets.
Hey, it's her movie, I guess.
Sure. Sure.
It's funny. I think because this book doesn't occupy a place in my heart, not for any reason other than it just doesn't, than other books, and the same for the original movie. It's really easy for me to not be as critical. Like, I'm just kind of fine with it. But I can imagine if either of those are important to you, that's probably a frustrating thing, and understandably so.
Yeah. I mean, it's not something that I care that much about, really, but I do think that because we have something to compare it to, when I didn't watch the 2019 movie, obviously, but I did, like, looking at clips from it and a lot of the stills, I do think that the costuming is kind of discordant. It's weird. Like, it doesn't work for me. Outside of the accuracy issue, it feels kind of slapped together is an insulting way to talk about a professional's work, and I don't mean it to be, but it feels more disjointed.
Right.
And the costuming in the 94 version feels very seamless and lived in and connected. There's just like all these weird details in the 2019 version that just kind of like threw me when looking at the clips. Like, it just didn't make a lot of sense to my vague knowledge of what life would be like then.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a totally fair assessment. I think it is likely they just weren't that concerned with that, which, again, I guess is their choice. I don't know. But I do think then it is a little odd that it won the Oscar, right? It's not that it was nominated.
No, it won.
So
yeah, the only reason I know that is we should link to this in the show notes. There's a really funny YouTube video by a creator named Makara Tours, and she explains in a humorous way why this Oscar probably shouldn't have gone to Little Women, and pauses to make a bonnet out of a cereal box in the middle to show how easy it is. So it's worth watching. It's really funny if you're interested in costuming at all.
We'll link to that in the show notes for sure.
Yeah.
Is it time to talk cast?
Yeah, I think so. I noted at the top from the article that I read in the Australian Cinema magazine, my favorite quote: "We also purposely cast all pale-skinned girls."
Fair. That's
Winona luckily already had pale skin, but it was important to try to tie them together as sisters. As soon as an actor was cast, we sent them a note saying, "Do not go into the sun. Do not bleach your hair. Grow everything. And please come back to us au naturel."
That's so funny.
Yeah.
That's 19th century. That's Northeast. That's
lots of pale Massachusetts women.
Perfect.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the top, obviously, we have Winona Ryder. This is the same year Reality Bites came out, which is such a fun contrast.
She has such a fun career. She really feels like someone who does what she wants to do. It's only a few years after Mermaids, which we just talked about.
Yeah. Same year as Reality Bites, a few years before Girl Interrupted. You know, fucking Beetlejuice. Like, she does things she's interested in, which is really cool. So we've talked a lot about Winona Ryder in the past.
Beetlejuice. She's kind of like one of Tim Burton's girls. Yes. She was offered outright Sleepy Hollow and turned it down, I think because she was getting a little, like, I think she was probably maybe worried about being typecast a little bit for someone who does seem to like to do such a variety of roles. So I just thought that was interesting.
She also wasn't Age of Innocence before this.
Right, also. It was right before this, yeah.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about Winona Ryder. We've covered a lot of her career. The one thing I didn't know is that her godfather was Timothy Leary.
How have I never come across that?
Yeah, so because of where she lived, she grew up in this like sort of commune in Petaluma, right? Her family's her parents were friends with, Timothy Leary, who was her godfather, Allen Ginsberg, science fiction novelist Philip K. Dick, and Lawrence Ferlinghetti. Like, that's who her parents were hanging out with.
Can you imagine?
No, I cannot. Just, Tim Leary, Godfather. It's wild.
That's so fun.
Wild. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that because that makes me laugh. Just imagining little baby Winona Ryder hanging out with Tim Leary and Allen Ginsberg. Like, no wonder she's cool and chose interesting parts.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. She
and like stayed true to herself. Mm-hmm. And honestly, makes much more sense now that she shoplifted from Saks Fifth Avenue because like...
Yeah, we kind of paint it as this breakdown thing, but I kind of think it's more, I don't know. I just think she's
maybe
so
it's just that she doesn't think Saks should, you know, have as much money as they do. I don't know. Right. Probably not. But really, like, whatever.
She plays, maybe this is just I don't know that we need to go through the plot of this movie. It is kind of hard to. It's a lot of little moments.
Well, four sisters, mother, father away at war. You know, we've got like the older fancy one that wants to be in society but is poor. We've got Joe, the sort of masculine rebel author person. We've got Amy, the like young sort of classic girly girl. And then we've got Beth, the sick one. There you go. And the neighbor.
And
Laurie.
The neighbor Laurie and the old German professor who's so often German, but not always German, depending on the adaptation professor who shows up at the end. There's Lisa Brown is like a comic artist who does these like 3-panel literary reviews. You've probably seen them online. She did one for Little Women that is actually 4, and it's the 4 girls. Each one gets their own panel. So it's Joe, Meg, Amy, Beth, and they're described each one with one word. So it's smart, sweet, spoiled, dead for poor Beth.
Reminds me of Teen Girl Squad.
Exactly. Yeah, the ugly one. Yeah, exactly.
The ugly one. Yeah. That's perfect.
So I just think that's exactly it. But so just, you know, setting that up. So Joe then obviously Winona Ryder in this one. Saoirse Ronan in the 2019 version.
I think that some of the commentary I read about Winona Ryder playing Joe is that in the book, Joe is more masculine and feminine are terms I don't love, but is portrayed as more masculine and boyish. And Winona Ryder is very like dainty and, you know, but I think that was intentional by the people involved in the creation. They wanted to portray Joe as like complicating this idea that like, because you're headstrong and smart and literary and, you know, anachronistic to the times doesn't mean that you necessarily also have to look a certain way, which I'm not sure if that's a good decision or a bad, but it was notable that they chose someone that looks like Winona Ryder for this part.
Right. Yeah. And then our Beth, as we mentioned, is the always quivering,
ethereal, angelic,
exquisite crier,
doe-eyed. Yes. Yeah. I watched her in this and I was like, I feel like she's a way better actor than she gets credit for because like she was in Homeland for so long. And I think that show, I never watched that show, but she plays sort of I believe a bipolar, like technically bipolar, like agent of some kind. I should know, but I don't. Works in Homeland Security. There you go. But I do think that show required some like for her to push the over the topness a bit in her acting style. And watching her earlier stuff, you realize like when she plays a very emotionally deep person or character, it's amazing what she can do with that chin and her giant eyes.
Her face when she gets when the neighbor Mr. Lawrence gifts her the piano.
Oh my God, yeah.
Her face is so ugly there in such an intentional way.
She's really like, good at ugly crying.
Yeah, or she's like trying to hold it back and is so happy but overwhelmed, and she's just one of those face actors that.
Well, and I always remember the scene right before she dies when she's talking to Joe about how she's not afraid.
Oh my God.
That monologue is really emotional.
And I didn't think I was going to fall for it. I didn't think it was going to make me cry because it is a little.
Oh yeah. It's a little bit like this movie in general, the critique you could make is that it's a little bit sentimental, but so is the novel, and so is this style of writing.
Well, that's what's so funny about the novel is that I think is worth mentioning because of how this movie is treated, and because of what comes later with the 2019 version. Is Joe is a Louisa May, self-insert. Like, Louisa May went by Lou the same way that Josephine goes by Joe.
Yeah.
She started out basically writing genre fiction like Joe, was encouraged to write something like Little Women and did. She was like, well, all right, I'll send it. Like, you might think this is dull, but let's give it a whirl.
Yeah.
But the sisters, kind of like Beth being treated so sentimentally. So Louisa's one of 4 sisters.
Yep.
And one of them who's named Elizabeth, Beth, she's the only one whose name she didn't change because she couldn't bear to because she was dead.
Yeah, apparently she was called Lizzie, but same name.
Right. As opposed to the other ones who were Abigail May, Amy May, Meg is Anna, and then of course, Louisa and Elizabeth.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because on the one hand, this is Louisa's life, and so it makes sense that she'd be a little sentimental about, her dead sister. But on the other hand, there's a lot of this that she didn't take seriously.
Not at all, yeah.
Readers and viewers take very seriously. And I think that's so fun.
Yeah, she was like, when she started to try to write this, like you said, was like, basically sent it, I believe, to her editor or something. It was like, you're probably going to find this really dull. And like, she didn't think the characters were that interesting. And then when it was the readers that told them, no, we really love this.
Because, it was published in 2 parts. And the first publication, kind of took everybody by storm and they loved it so much. And then that rushed the second volume.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that as we kind of talk about these characters.
And apparently there were the 2 sequels, neither of which I read because I had no interest in reading about boys at the time. But there was also Little Men and Joe's Boys.
Yeah. Well, and Alcott, that's the other thing is that, she really wanted to be a writer, of course, but a big motivation was so that she could take care of her family. And so I have not been that interested to read Little Men or Joe's Boys because I have a feeling that they're on the success of, and hearing, which we'll talk about later, I know I keep saying that, how she talks about the reception of Little Women. I don't know how interested I am to read the other 2. But so that's Beth and her, where she comes from and how she ends up this way in this movie.
Yeah. Apparently Claire, playing Beth, apparently, there was an interview, I think it was the history that they did before Greta Gerwig's movie came out. But Winona Ryder says that Claire Danes went to hospices and did a lot of research on passing away. And Claire says, I don't remember that, but I did do a fair amount of research. Dying can be a little fun. With Beth, there's a death rattle. It's demonstrates guttural wheezing noise. The day we shot that scene, my death rattle got progressively louder until Jillian was like, Claire, you've got to kill it on the death rattle. Which is so funny. As an actor, I'm sure getting a death scene like that is really exciting. Well,
and it was the other thing about Claire at this point is that this was 94, which, it also premiered in 1994.
Do I know? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yes, My So-Called Life.
That's right. And apparently that's how she was cast in Little Women. I forget who is connected to both of them, but somebody on the set of My So-Called Life before it had even aired was like, you have to check out this Claire Danes character.
Yep.
And
she watched her chin quiver and said, that's my Beth.
That's my Beth. And then she did a bunch of stuff in between 94 and 96 that I don't care about. But then, of course, Romeo and Juliet, and then everything she does after that. But, those are the important ones for me.
Yeah. So Amy March, played by 2 actors in this one, Kirsten Dunst. This is our other Jersey connection. She was from Point Pleasant.
Kirsten Dunst is from New Jersey?
Until the age of 11, she lived in Brick.
How didn't I know that?
And went to school in Tinton Falls.
What?
Yeah.
Wow. Fascinating. I did not know that.
Yeah. We can claim another one.
She's also our first manic pixie dream girl named on screen.
Yep.
This was her first.
I believe so. Her first real film role.
Because she's credited in Bonfire of the Vanities, which I've never seen.
I think she had a decent sized role in that, but this was her first real big breakout.
And in the same year as Interview with the Vampire. and a year before
which
Jumanji.
to me is the huge one for her.
Yeah. Just like a little star kind of immediately.
Yeah.
I read in terms of alternate casting for that one that Reese Witherspoon came pretty close, and that if it had been her, they probably would have only cast the one actor because she could kind of play both ages. Because it's over the course of 5 years, and I think Amy's supposed to be 12 at the start, right? So
apparently, also people who also read for Amy were Natalie Portman and Thora Birch, but Kirsten Dunst kind of blew them out of the water in the casting process. Samantha Mathis, again, for the older sister.
Yeah, who we wouldn't have if not for their casting of Kirsten Dunst, because we probably would have had Reese Witherspoon. Yep. So you've got Kirsten to thank for that. I know you have.
Appreciate it.
I know your feelings on Samantha Mathis.
Especially at this time. I mean, this is 4 years after Pump Up the Volume. She plays a wildly different character in this.
I kind of feel bad for her in this because, the first reason I feel bad for her is one of the stories, she was at that Q&A, one of the stories she tells is that Kirsten Dunst in real life as a young person was apparently really bored, and I can relate to this, cut her own bangs. And that's why she has those weird little, I call them West Philly bangs, but those like tiny little bangs.
Yeah, they are bad.
And then to bring her into the present or into the 5 years later, poor Samantha Mathis then at first had to, and they moved past it. But she talks about the fact that they had to make her also have those bangs at first.
They're so bad.
So that's the first reason I feel bad for her. The second reason is she's great, but it's so strange. One of the failures of this movie for me is how they sort of smooth over Amy. She has so much personality as a kid, and then the older version of her, they just don't. And because the movie more so than the book, or because the movie obviously for the sake of time has to sacrifice some things, Amy just doesn't get as much. And so her relationship with Laurie feels like it doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, it just feels like, it doesn't make sense that she would, in that 3 seconds we get of them together, decide. I mean, we're supposed to assume that she's been in love with him the whole time because of the carriage scene, but like, we don't really get that.
No. And the feeling in this movie, it's played very differently in the 2019 version, is that he says he's not, and it's hard to tell, but it really does feel like he's settling for Amy. Yeah. And also is just desperate to be a March child. It's to be part of that family. And on the one hand, Amy being sort of open about her desire to be taken care of, like there's a way where you can kind of look at it as her also being not practical, also like the kind of ambition that she has, but it isn't played that way either. And so, none of that is the fault of Mathis. I think she's charming and watchable and all of that, but I feel bad for her.
She's not given a lot to do other than stand around and look pretty and, receive the affections of her neighbor in a way that feels sort of, like you said, like a second choice.
Mm-hmm. And then who we saved last on purpose. I know I always say
I want to talk about a couple other people first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have Christian Bale as Laurie. I found a fun quote talking about the casting process for Laurie. They had a hard time finding someone because at the time, most of the men they were seeing were really into like bodybuilding. Like it was the 90s and there was a certain body type that men were aspiring to. An article that I read said, we had a really enthusiastic turnout, but so many of them were really into bodybuilding, which is incorrect for the period. Also, there were a lot of young American actors who played very, quote unquote, street. They were all doing Marlon Brando. They couldn't deal with the language at all. They were so used to improvising grunting that to speak period dialogue and sound natural was actually an art. So Christian Bale became Laurie for this film.
And then in the 2019 version, it's the boyishly charming, it makes so much sense, I think, Timothée Chalamet as Laurie.
Yeah.
I've always been sort of indifferent to him, erring more on the positive side. I think he makes interesting choices. But he's really charming in the 2019 version in a way where you do really kind of buy his whole thing with Joe and Amy, and that it doesn't feel as, because Amy is played by Florence Pugh in both timelines. They don't do it doesn't feel as weird that Christian Bale like knew Kirsten Dunst first. You know what I mean? Like that sort of goes away. So I think that was also a really smart choice. I don't know how I'd feel about it if Christian Bale were my Laurie. I don't have one. Like, so it feels fine to me.
Yeah. Eric Stoltz, like we said, as John Brooke.
Yeah, in that same, I'll keep going back to Q&A, he was so sweet when he talked about this. He was like, they kept saying they didn't have anything for me. And I said, how about I play John? Like, I just want to be in this movie. I don't care that the role is small. He seems lovely.
Yeah. We do need to mention Susan Sarandon as Mrs. March. Also, New Jersey. She, at 4 years old, moved from New York City with her family to what is now Edison, was the Stephenville community at the time. But she and her sisters attended St. Francis in Metuchen. So,
Fun.
And then she went to Edison High School. So,
okay, so there is more Jersey than I realized.
That's what I was saying. Yeah, I couldn't remember where it was in my notes, but it's it's in the casting. Susan Sarandon and Kirsten Dunst.
Of course, Sarandon. I don't know. I mean, I knew that too. That just slipped my mind.
Yeah. John Neville is Mr. Lawrence and Mary Wicks is Aunt March. But now we can talk about... Oh, wait, no.
You pause on Mary Wicks.
I know. I was trying to get us to the thing you wanted to talk about, but we can pause on Mary Wicks.
I love her. And also, did we mention Gabriel Byrne?
I have to talk about him real quick, yeah.
Mary Wicks, most importantly, is Sister Mary Lazarus from Sister Act and Sister Act 2 Back in the Habit. I love her so much in those movies. She's also in the Father Dowling Mysteries, which come up from time to time as a weird show that I loved as a kid. So I just think we can't not mention that.
No, of course. And then we have obviously Gabriel Byrne as Friedrich Baer, excuse me. Did you see who the initial candidate was before it was Gabriel Byrne?
There were a couple of names I saw thrown around. One that I would have been so curious to see. Which one are you thinking of?
So I also saw a couple, but the one I was thinking of was Hugh Grant.
Yes,
which is apparently it's partly because a lot of the people involved had a crush on him.
That's so funny. He was like too handsome.
Yeah, he was too young and confident. And the other one I saw was John Turturro was lobbying for it. But apparently they wanted a more poetic version of the character, which, I don't know, John Turturro is pretty poetic, but they chose Gabriel Byrne. Yeah,
Turturro was the one where I was like, I would have been so interested to see him. But that might just be because of how I feel about him now.
From Severance, Like, the version of him in Severance, in this movie.
Right.
Yes.
And then it's sort of marriage of convenience for both of them because we know that...
Exactly.
Then I kind of like that.
I know this keeps happening to me as I'm an older person now, watching things I watched when I was younger, but the age difference here is just so... I know that it's supposed to be that, like, the thing is that he's inappropriate for her, but...
Well, this is the thing that is so funny to me, is that, like, when Alcott published the first half, it was never her intention that Jo would end up with anybody, because it was never Alcott's intention for her to end up with anybody. And there's so much talk about Alcott's gender and her sexuality, and she outright said a lot of the stuff that Jo said about, like, wishing she'd been born a man and feeling Jewish, and it even says like women are pretty and easy to fall in love with. I've never fallen in love with a man. Like, these are like almost verbatim direct quotes. And so the thing that I really wanted to, when she talks about the inclusion of Bear in the book, she wrote in a letter, or I think in an interview, or maybe in a letter to a friend, but not a secret. Jo should have remained a literary spinster, but so many enthusiastic young ladies wrote to me clamorously demanding that she should marry Laurie or somebody that I didn't dare to refuse, and out of perversity went and made a funny match for her. I expect vials of wrath to be poured out upon my head, but rather enjoy the prospect.
Yeah.
She knows that Bear is a bad match. She said, here, you want Jo to get married. And then there's also something interesting about Jo marrying an old man who is, like, pretty sexless, like kind of like he's not a threat of.
I mean, by putting Gabriel Byrne in that role, like he does have sort of a magnetism to him.
This is the problem.
That's the problem.
The problem is people making these movies needing to feel like Jo should end up with someone who makes sense for her, and so now what you have to do is have somebody like Gabriel Byrne play when if they had the strength of their convictions, they'd cast like I don't
some
even,
nondescript weird
old man. It's funny, in the earlier adaptations, in the first one they do cast an older German actor in the 1930 whatever version, and then in the next version, which is 48, I think, he's younger and Italian. Which is post World War II. Right. So there's that part of it. Yeah. And also that they're like, forget it. We'll just make him a hot Italian guy. Who cares? Yeah. And then, so this one kind of splits the difference by casting Gabriel Byrne.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a little more striking to me this time, the age difference, but I also, I didn't know the whole story about Alcott's like choice for, but I did know that she didn't originally want Jo to end up with anyone. So. Yeah.
And then for 2019, Gerwig casts like somebody who is closer to Jo's age, and I think he's French. But now's a good time to talk about this. I think the sort of joke, the sort of meta element of that movie is it's a nonlinear narrative. So the first thing you do is you meet Jo in the 5 years later of it. And she said there were a couple of reasons she did that, which I think are really smart. Is the first time you meet Laurie is with Amy. She was like, in movies, the first person you see another person with is the person you're going to root for them to be with. So we'll introduce.
That makes sense.
Totally. And they spend more time together in the movie, and you get why the two of them are a good match. But the other thing is you get to encounter Jo talking with her editor a lot. And as we get to the end of the movie, where the same thing happens, where Gabriel Byrne shows up, is when Bear shows up in this movie. And then as they're about to declare their love for each other, Jo pops back in talking to her editor. And she's like, no, she's not marrying either of them. Like, that's not going to happen. And the editor says, like, well, you have to. And then it cuts back to the narrative, and he's a Deus Ex Machina who comes in. But in your head that, like, the Jo that exists outside of the Little Women book that exists inside of the narrative of Little Women the movie doesn't have to get married. And it's clever. Such a clever, fun way to sort of, like, for Greta to have her cake and for the audience to eat it too. Yeah. And to like hold true to the book, but also have a lot to say about Alcott's life and role. And I think it's really smart. And it's one of the reasons that I'm sort of forgiving of it, because it really does handle the issues inherent in all of the other adaptations in a really smart way.
Well, that makes a lot of sense now, knowing, because the people that I watched talk about the costuming, both of them said that they really liked how the movie in 2019 worked narratively. They liked that part a lot, and it was just they were like picking at the costumes, but that makes a lot of sense.
My last note about the 2019 version is that Bob Odenkirk plays Mr. March.
I saw that in a clip. So funny.
I've heard so many people talk about it, and on Comedy Bang Bang, they always joke, I thought, about Odenkirk showing up and saying, "My Little Women." And I thought that was just them doing a bit, but he does. He literally says it.
That's so funny.
So funny.
Shall we talk about Meg?
I think we got to talk about Meg. Again, we do it all the time where we're like, oh, can't believe, blah, blah, blah. But, like, of course, movies in the 90s are going to feature actors from the 90s, and that's going to happen a lot.
Yeah.
But Meg?
Yeah.
Is
Trini Alvarado,
who we know first and foremost
from Times Square.
Times Square, a movie that we kind of randomly found our way to through Empire Records. Like, it's not like that movie was huge at the time. It's like a very strange movie.
Yeah, we were kind of like interested in it and perplexed by it at the same time.
But here she is. She's Meg.
She's Meg. I know. Interestingly, she says that I do have the distinction of being the only Puerto Rican and Spanish Meg that I know of.
Hell yeah. Good for you. Good for you, Trini.
She said, it was my Puerto Rican mama who first gave me that book. Except for the corsets, it was a dream. Yeah, it's so funny. When I watched it again for the podcast, I recognized her, and I didn't make the connection because it's such a wildly different role.
Exactly. I didn't realize either. It's just, especially because we covered Times Square so long ago that if you had asked me who was in that movie, there's no way I would have been able to pull up any names.
No. Other than Tim Curry.
Well, obviously other than Tim Curry.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is...
Yeah.
That was
such a fun connection. Yeah. We can talk reviews.
Yeah. Is it time to talk?
Let's talk about reviews. Let's visit with our friend Roger Ebert. He gave it 3.5 stars?
3.5 stars.
3.5 stars. Although he starts with like a backhanded compliment.
He cannot talk about a movie made by or featuring women prominently without saying shit like this.
It's so backhanded.
It's so obvious. He can't help himself.
This is a surprisingly sharp and intelligent telling of Louisa May Alcott's famous story and not the soft-edged children's movie it might appear.
Why is it surprising?
Surprising? Why?
You said yourself it's a first-rate cast.
The first couple of sentences are basically like... not nice. The second sentence, he says, in one of the first frames, the 4 little women and their mother managed to arrange their heads within the frame with all of the spontaneity of a Kodak ad. 3.5 stars. And you start with, this is surprisingly sharp and intelligent.
Such an asshole. On, man. I know that's part of the thing of him is generally that he's an asshole, but...
He talks about Winona Ryder's performance, says the most forcible personality in the family is the tomboy daughter Jo, played in a strong and sunny performance by Winona Ryder. She wants to be a writer and stages family theatricals in which everyone, even the long-suffering cat, is expected to play a role. There are a lot of cats in this movie, and I had forgotten how many cats and kittens there are, and it made me so happy. Yeah, everyone's just holding a random cat, and they're not the same cat. There's like a white cat, and there's like another cat, there's a bigger cat, a smaller cat. There's just a lot of cats.
It's a very cat-forward movie.
I love it. More movies should be cat-forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm into it. Overall, it got mostly positive reviews. Ebert was sort of... in lockstep with his other colleagues on this.
Yeah, and I think rightly so. Again, the issues that I find with it are not so egregious that they can't be overlooked, I think.
Yeah. It is a little surprising to me. I mean, it's not surprising that he starts with that backhanded compliment because it is a little surprising that so many male critics reviewed this movie positively. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you found... the essay on Bright Wall, Dark Room about...
I don't think so.
It was called Home is Where the Hurt Is. It just talks about why this movie kind of resonates for people despite what it is, right? It's a sentimental retelling of a Victorian woman's novel. But basically she says... I can make a credible case for Little Women as a good movie, but hardly a great one. Yet I return to it over and over because for me, it signifies instantly and intuitively home. She says, this nuanced attitude towards home is present in many of the 19th century novels that have been categorized, often pejoratively, as sentimental literature, a subgenre that focuses on the domestic sphere and of which Little Women is a canonical example. Sentimental novels have been readily dismissed through much of 20th century literary history, sidelined by a critical tradition that contrasts them unfavorably with more quote-unquote difficult works of literature. There's gender bias at play in this discrimination. Most sentimental novelists were women, most literary critics men, but also relatively a privileging of the public sphere over the domestic. And so she's talking about basically why these things resonate, even though we kind of know what we're like, we know the manipulation that's happening. She says the best sentimental works, though, remind us of a truth we'd rather forget, that strength is not the only admirable thing, that the weakness of tears, of bearing suffering, is noble and human as well. At their best, families allow us to make peace with weakness, not just by providing opportunities for pain, but also by giving us a safe place to shed our tears. Little Women embraces its sentimental roots, and by doing so functions like a safety valve through which those who love the film as I do can release and process complicated feelings towards home. Which I think is a really nice way of framing, like, both the structural reasons that, like, this movie might feel trite or, you know, too nostalgic and sentimental, but also why that's important to have.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I think that's right. I really like that. It's a really, like, tender and thoughtful way of thinking
this was a nice... like reflection. It's like a personal essay reflection on the movie's role in her life, but also thinking about it as a cultural object.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
She also says about Beth's death scene, who's talking about Claire Danes, whose wobbling chin and fragile voice could wring sadness from a stone. That's great.
That's really good.
Yeah. The nostalgia of this movie, though, and the sentimentality also, I think, brings with it like it's like heteronormative propaganda also. Mm-hmm. You know, I think I said to you yesterday off mic that I no longer want to hear anyone talking about how queer movies and TV will like make kids queer, because the amount of straight propaganda that I watched over my lifetime is insane.
Well, and not just straight propaganda, but the kind that insists that like a movie can't end successfully until all of the men and all of the women have been paired up together.
Yeah, exactly. It reminds me weirdly of we were talking about the final scene in Clueless, where they're all sitting around the table and they've all been paired up and they're at this wedding and everybody's like got a significant other and it's all, you know, it's all neatly tied in a bow. Other than Christian, who's off being fabulous.
Yeah, and you know, marriage plot, like in literature especially, is a specific genre, and so there's a long history of it, obviously, and Clueless being based on Emma, which kind of complicates it, but whatever. It's, again, unsurprising that we have such a deep history of it, and it is a little frustrating that Alcott tried to push against it and in the end was forced into it, and then her joke of it has like repeatedly attempted to be turned into something acceptable, and the lengths will go to do that they couldn't just play it the way it was until we get Gerwig's version.
You couldn't possibly portray an older woman living a quote unquote spinster life as a positive.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think because we're this podcast, we should talk a little bit about, but there's a part of me that wants to let Alcott live her life in death and not keep dragging her body through this conversation. But the story of, was Alcott queer? Was Alcott trans? Obviously, they didn't have that language then, but it comes up over and over. And there is an essay by Peyton Thomas, who wrote like an op-ed in the New York Times. They're the host of a podcast called Joe's Boys, Little Women podcast. New York Times asked, was Louisa May Alcott a woman? And the article traces through a lot of Alcott talking about her own identity, and I'm using her because she never asked specifically for her with other pronouns. But she did say things like, you know, she went by Lou, as we said, or Louie. She referred to herself as Papa or father of her young nephews. Her father, Bronson, once called her his only son. She called herself a man of all work, a gentleman at large. And it's hard to say, like, if that's just because we had, and still do to an extent, but at the time had such a strict idea of gender and sexuality that if she felt attracted to women, that to her that meant she must be a man, or if her gender identity was of a man. And I'm not kind of interested in deciding that for Alcott, but I do think it's worth noting when we're talking about how Jo is often portrayed and this desire to force this relationship to happen that kind of didn't need to.
Yeah. There's also the idea that, like, at the time, presentation of a woman was so strictly feminine that if you strayed at all from that, like, norm, I could see that being something that would push you so far to jokingly refer to yourself as a man, right? I don't have the desire to wear skirts and have long hair and wear makeup and all that stuff, so I must be a man, right? Like, there was much less of the in-between idea of how to dress like a woman. Right,
exactly. And I don't want to say, again, I'm not dismissing or erasing a trans identity. I'm just saying there are a variety of options, or a variety of possibilities. And she even says in an interview from 1883, I am more than half persuaded that I am a man's soul put by some freak of nature into a woman's body. But then she says, because I have fallen in love in my life with so many pretty girls and never once the least bit with any man. So there's that heteronormative expectation, that compulsory heterosexuality that at the time, if you're attracted to a woman, it must mean you're a man, which is such a tortured, convoluted way of having to work through your own sexuality and gender, and is all the more reason why it's important to have the language to describe these things and to be, and like why being so prescriptive about it can be really damaging. So, though I think the only thing we all can say is that Alcott was not a straight woman. Like, that's the one I think category we can probably cross out. There's a scholar, a children's literature scholar who I love, Roberta Seelinger Treats. And in 1999, an essay called Queer Performances was published in a book called Little Women in the Feminist Imagination that she wrote. And I just really, again, I don't even, we can take Alcott out of this. I just have, anytime we can talk about Freud, I want to talk about Freud because I think he's such a bonehead, but I also think it's so fun to think through using the frameworks that he set up for literature and with literature. And Seelinger writes about a different scholar, it doesn't matter, I just haven't read the original, this like Freudian reading of Jo, and the Oedipal complex being that boys want to kill their father and marry their mother, and that Jo follows that through line, which then, as opposed to the Electra complex, which is the girl's opposite of, or the girl's counterpoint to. But instead, Jo is acting out the Oedipal complex, which then further complicates her gender in the book, right? Because she's acting out the young boy's version of this complex. In that Alcott writes the father out of the story. He's back at the Civil War. Alcott's father was very present. He was also, interesting though, an abolitionist, a vegan. He was so vegan that he only ate vegetables that grew upward. So like potatoes were off the list. But he was like pretty much around. He like left while his wife was having one of the children to go study at a library in Philly or like somewhere in Pennsylvania, I think. But for the most part, he was around. So it's interesting that Jo's father, he gets written out but not killed. And then she asserts herself. She refers to herself as the man of the house in the book. And there's a significant haircut. She cuts her hair off, and castration is so Freudian.
I totally forgot about the significant haircut.
Yeah. And I just said castration is so Freudian with haircut in a breath as if that's like, but it is something Freud has always said, like another example or another symbol of castration is cutting of hair. And so all of that.
The reason we have the idea of the significant haircut is because often it's a woman cutting off her long hair when she becomes a radical of some kind.
That's right. And this is another 2019 thing that I love, is in the 1994 version, her hair looks like shit. Like she cuts it off and it's like a fuck ass, like it's not great. In Gerwig's version, it's like this cute little close cropped curly, like Saoirse looks great. Jo looks so good with this haircut. And it's like, because it doesn't have to be Jo mutilating her looks, you know what I mean? And making her ugly. It's further like bringing her into what we consider more typically masculine gender presentation.
Right.
Amy does get to say the line I love so much. You're one beauty.
You're one beauty. I know, it's so good.
Brutal.
That's so funny.
So I know that was a lot of Freud and a lot of gender stuff, but this book just lends itself to it. So, and we could get the Treats article really outlines. It gets pretty radical in how it reads. There's like some stuff of, she uses Jo's relationship with her sisters and mother to talk about the homosocial space. And it is, you have to really be willing to go with Treats and to trust her as a scholar to not kind of bristle against that. Yeah. But again, homosocial doesn't mean homosexual, and it doesn't mean that Jo has romantic feelings or sexual feelings for her family members. I want to be clear about that. But it does feel like it's beyond the scope of this podcast to really dig into it beyond, I just like to talk about Freud.
Well, and I do think we had to at least touch on it, though, considering how often the subject of the tomboy or the masculine presentation or the transition from like a very feminine character to, I keep thinking of Legend of Billie Jean right now, where she like cuts off all her hair to go from this like, you know, blonde Southern feminine woman to like Joan of Arc,
exactly,
essentially.
Yeah.
And so we've talked about, you know, this idea of the tomboy and other ways of categorizing non-traditionally feminine women in film. So we kind of had to include that. But yeah, I mean, I will say, like, as a young person reading this novel, the presentation of Jo as a more like assertive masculine type was really important to me. Like, she was a writer. If you had asked me until the age of about 19 what I wanted to be, the answer would have been a writer, especially when I was younger and especially when I was reading things like Little Women. Absolutely. And so it was like this sort of example for me of a type of person that I admired and could see myself as.
You get to see her doing so much more writing. This ended up becoming a pro 2019 version podcast more than I expected it to. But you get to see her doing her craft, practicing her craft way more often in the 2019 version. She also doesn't decide to write Little Women because the weird old professor tells her she should.
That rang a little weird to me.
Yeah, he's not the one who introduces her to opera. Like, she's way more independent in that version. Which is a very 2019 versus 1994. You know, it makes sense that...
Yeah, because it does feel in the 94 version like Gabriel Byrne's character is a little bit like, let me show you, young lady, how like, great you are.
Paternal, like, in a way.
Yeah, it's a little creepy. I kind of think we did it.
I think we did it.
I'm glad we watched it. I keep saying this, like, we're going through all these like quote unquote women's movies, and I have this resistance to watching them again because I'm afraid I'm either going to be bored or kind of embarrassed of my younger self for liking them at the time, which is silly because of course I did. I grew up in this society. But so far I've ended up sort of happily revisiting them with some obvious, you know, differences, but feeling like, oh, I get why this worked at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And I love the set dressing and the costuming and the way that this is designed is really, it feels, not to harp on the costumes specifically, but overall the way that the house is decorated and the way that it feels so accurate to a rambling, slightly older, rundown New England house, right, which is where I've spent a lot of time in the last 20 years of my life. And so it just, like, even though it's filmed in Vancouver, like, it feels very, very New England in its design. I
will say the only thing that doesn't necessarily feel the most 19th century New England, these faces in this movie, as I texted you. Everyone looks so 90s. Like, they're just the 90s faces in this movie. It's the only thing that is hard to separate.
I think that's partly because that's just what we associate them with, because they were so famous in the 90s.
Because you know that thing about iPhone face? Like, these people look like they've seen an iPhone. Yes. It's that, except these people have seen, like, the Mac with, like, the candy colored shell.
They've listened to Exile in Guyville.
Yeah, yes. Like, that's exactly what these faces look like.
I do think that I understood your hesitation with the jumping around time-wise and jumping back to this era from where we had been. But the thing that I think connects this to things like Steel Magnolias and the movie we're doing next is this idea of female relationships, groups of women. It's often friends in the movies like Steel Magnolias, but the sisters function as their own sort of female support group, bonded community. And that is sort of a running theme through a lot of what we've been talking about lately, including our next film, which is not one I've seen. So we're flopping. I had seen Little Women. You hadn't. You have seen
so many
next
times.
Film, Now and Then, which is something I'm not even sure I had heard of this movie. Like, I think I had, but...
It's unbelievable to me that you haven't seen this movie.
Yeah. No, it came out in 95. I was in my... I'm a cool girl that watches Tarantino movies phase. This is not something on my radar at all.
But it is still, I mean, Demi Moore, Thora Birch, Gabby Hoffman, Rita Wilson, Melanie Griffith, Rosie O'Donnell, Christina Ricci, of course, is our most direct connection. Cloris Leachman, Janine Garofalo, like, it is Bonnie Hunt. It is, number one, because we're in this time period, it makes sense. Obviously, Christina Ricci connection. It's also a movie with paired actors playing the same character in two different timelines. So that's, I mean, not only is that Little Women sort of because of Kirsten Dunst and Samantha Mathis, but obviously Yellow Jackets.
Yeah.
So it just makes so much sense. I'm so excited for you to watch this movie.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to see it too. It's clearly a blind spot because I don't honestly know if I'd even heard of it.
It's fascinating
until you started talking about it, but
it's directed by Leslie Linka Glatter, and we'll get into her next week. But a ton of connections to other things that we have that we have talked about. So yeah,
awesome.
I'm excited.
I am excited. Where does it take place? In the South, it looks like. Filmed in the Country Walk subdivision off Coffee Bluff Road in Savannah, Georgia. It's called Shelby, Indiana in the film.
I was going to say nobody has a Southern accent.
Okay. It's filmed in Georgia, but it takes place in Indiana.
Whoa, you're already telling people. Well, it's a little sneak preview.
Yes, I've ruined everything. It was filmed in Georgia.
Uh-huh.
That'll be fun. While they are diving into this classic female friendship film that they have or haven't seen, and if they want to tell us something about their reaction to it or their feelings about Little Women, whether they preferred the 2019 or 94 version, where could they do that?
They could find us at WatchersPodNJ on Instagram. They could email us, WatchersPodNJ@gmail. You can find me on Instagram at AQAndreaQ.
You can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and just tell us there.
Please.
It can just be 5 stars, 94.
That's
Little
right.
Women.
That's right.
We'll take it. Mm-hmm. You can find me on Instagram at Jodie_Mim, JODIE_MIM. And we'll see you next week in Indiana.
By way of Georgia.
Yeah, with a bunch of ladies.